Well, with me now from Deloitte is Roger Bootle, one of the city's most respected economists. Thank you very much for joining us this morning to discuss the budget. Let's start first with the tax on banks. Many people saying that it's not actually as large as many feared. Do you think it's going to drive people out of the city?
I don't think it is on its own, no, because it isn't actually that big. It's, I think, gesture politics. I fully understand why the coalition has felt it had to do this. Banks were at the centre of what went wrong. It cost the taxpayer an awful lot of money. It does seem to make a certain amount of sense to ask the banks to pay some money back. However, this isn't the result of a carefully constructed plan or approach to banking, and quite frankly, we'll have to do better in the years to come.
We've heard that Germany and France are also on board, but where does this leave us going into the G20?
Well, I don't think we're going to see, frankly, an answer to this question yet. As you know, the Chancellor of the Exchequer here has set up a commission to look into the whole structure of the banking system. I think we're going to have to wait for the results of that.
Now, George Osborne probably needed to have a bank tax yesterday because there were so many other cuts that were actually going to affect middle-income, lower-income families. 25% public spending cuts across many departments. It really is an awful lot, and we haven't seen the beginning of this pain yet. Do you think it's doable?
Oh, I think it's doable. I mean, these are huge numbers. Although, don't forget, actually, they're not that much bigger than the cuts that were implicit in Labour's plans.
But then they haven't been implemented either.
I know, but Labour's plans had cuts of 20%. So he's simply driven it up from 20 to 25. Yeah, and I think it's doable. What we don't yet know, of course, is how the economy is going to hold up. I mean, the really big unanswered question and the gamble of this budget is what's going to happen if the economy does not deliver, and it's generally thought that this budget has pushed the economy over the edge.
So if it goes too far over the edge, the acid test for that is going to be slower growth, higher unemployment?
Yes, I suspect slower growth people will just about accept. I mean, the real danger, of course, is we go back into recession.
What kind of a danger do you think that is? I know it's difficult to quantify.
It is difficult to quantify, but I think it's a realistic danger. This is a gamble. It's a big risk. In particular, it's a risk because what's going on in other countries, of course, is they're also competing to say, my austerity package is bigger than yours. And the result of all this is that every country's export market is being squeezed.
Now, it does depend quite on how we do it. I was listening to George Osborne speaking just a little bit earlier this morning, and he seemed to be saying that, look, if you don't like these public spending cuts, if they're not palatable enough, there is another way, which is to cut welfare even further, to make it even more unpleasant to be out of work. That is also something then that's going to target the poorest, and something presumably that the coalition wouldn't like.
Well, I think this government's got some serious thinking yet to do. Although it's outlined some pretty horrendous numbers, we don't yet know exactly where the burden's going to fall. I know it seems as though it's ghastly today, but actually I think the real pain will only come in October.
The problem is, of course, that we're talking about, say, for example, 25%, a quarter of, for example, the Home Office's budget being taken away. And actually, that means that we're going to have to look at whether or not you salami slice, as it were, and try and take a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot, a quarter of everything, or whether you look at areas and say, OK, that is just not something that the state can do anymore. Have you any thoughts on which way this should be divided up? Oh,
I think there definitely should be a clear philosophy with regard to what the state should do. This is, I think, the disappointing thing about this budget. It really didn't give us much of a clue in answer to that. In practice, it's probably too much to have expected. We'll have to wait for the spending review coming in October. But I very much hope what we'll see then is some clear thinking about what government should be doing, rather than simply saying, right, 25% off everything.
Now, this was also a budget for growth. George Osborne said a few times, that we're open for business. Britain is open for business. Do you think that you saw much? I saw there was a lowering in corporation tax. Was there much there for business?
Well, this is really, again, all about signals. And what he signalled, I thought, was really pretty important. What we've seen before now is laying out plans for spending going forward. And here we have a plan going forward for tax cuts, important tax cuts. I thought it was an important gesture, particularly at the time, and of course he needs money. So I thought this was actually pretty good.
Good. And the last question, what about VAT? It was something that Nick Clegg campaigned against. He talked about the Tory VAT bombshell today. Yesterday he had to sit beside David Cameron and listen to 20% VAT now in the UK.
Well, I think Mr Clegg was wrong, quite frankly, in what he said during the campaign. Most of the markets, of course, were expecting VAT to go up. I mean, it really is a gift for a government at this stage. It brings in money pretty quickly and clearly. I thought that the government were pretty deft about the way they timed it. Putting it off until January is, I think, a pretty good move.
So we hopefully get some higher Christmas revenues.
Yes.
Roger Bootle, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.